retention doesn't just keep clients, it also turns them into your best marketing material. 2 reasons. Clients we retain that we have good relationships with are more likely to give us referrals. Wouldn't say that that's as common as a client who's been with you with a long-standing relationship, who's like, hey, yep, Sam's my guy for this. Go see this person, talk to them. They're going to take care of you. So when we think about this, long-standing relationships lead to easier marketing, but also we have a greater chance of having social proof with the person. Welcome to Science, where you're joining me nearly 2 decades into my personal journey to bridge the gap between macros, metabolism, muscle, and medicine. If you're joining me, thanks for trusting me to elevate your health and realize your true potential. Each week and inside every episode, I'll be sharing methods and models from my coaching journey and my personal experience, as well as the science that you need to achieve whatever specific goals you're working on in your life. Let's jump in to today's show. Naturally, when we're producing results for someone, since we are in the business of results, it makes retention much more likely. But if we don't have the right systems in place, even if we are pretty good at the science, we do leave certain spots kind of at risk, or there's a little bit of retention can be in jeopardy. On the other hand, if you feel that maybe you need to get more intermediate to advanced on the science side, that will naturally boost retention through improving your client results. And so these are more complementary. They're not competitive, right? The systems and the strategies behind good retention complement the science. And today is just a little bit more focused on kind of retention in the big picture as a whole. I've never really resonated with some of the online sales and marketing approaches that a lot of different companies will use. And some of those have a tendency to churn and burn the client roster. So a lot of the strategies taught by different business programs or gurus online tend to create like a blip in your Stripe or PayPal account. And maybe you make a revenue PR for 1 month, but then 3 to 6 months later, you're kind of left questioning like, well, what did I do wrong? Why am I not improving? Isn't this growth supposed to be linear? Like, what's happening to my clients? Or maybe we're attracting the wrong type of clients because of the marketing that we're doing. So in my experience and having interacted with a number of those individuals, seeing them do business, seeing a lot of it go really poorly, I was like, we have to be doing something differently on the back end of the relationship when a client signs, so that we're not stuck on this sales hamster wheel all the time. So first, this was just figuring this out for myself in my own business. I'm someone who had pretty humble origins in the health and fitness industry. The reason this is so important is because as we extend retention, it is one of the biggest drivers of lifetime client value or lifetime customer value. And lifetime client value can be measured when we're multiplying the months that we're with the client as far as the relationship goes, times the revenue or amount that they're paying monthly. If you wanted it to be more like lifetime gross profit per customer, you'd multiply the length of the relationship times that gross or times that profit. So I have 3 framing questions for you to really think about retention today and understand, like, why is client retention important and why do we need to continue to strive to increase it over time? So number 1 is, of the clients who started with you 12 months ago, what percentage are still paying you today? And if you have an absolute number, like if you have a smaller roster, that's fine if you happen to know that off the top of your head. But we want to look at this. So if you have 10 clients who started 12 months ago and 8 of them stayed, think about that math. If you started 20 clients 12 months ago, or last summer was really big for you, who's still kind of remaining after that. The second part of this is think about average client lifespan in months. I would encourage all of you to go into whatever tool you use to collect payments, whether that's Stripe or PayPal, or you have you're a brick and mortar gym owner and you use Mindbody or something like that, which is still integrated with Stripe. You want to go in and look at, there's something you can look at by cohort, which is if someone's on some type of membership or payment plan, you can see when they started and the longevity of that relationship. What you could also do is take a sample from your business, so like a certain number of clients who are on the same package of some kind or the same price service, and then look at the patterns across 10 or 20 accounts and look at averages if you need to. But typically there are ways to export this from your Stripe account. And now with some of the technology and AI tools available, it's only going to be easier and easier to synthesize large amounts of data into stuff that we can actually interpret for our businesses. Number 3 is, if you stop signing new clients right now, and this is probably one of the more powerful questions on the list, what would your monthly revenue be 6 months from today? So that would assume that my entire business relies on keeping the current clients that I have. So whether that's 30, whether that's 5, whether you have 100 clients and you're trying to keep those, and maybe you have an assistant coach who's also working with them. The idea is, okay, if I had to make everything off of retaining my current clients, or we can also consider as kind of a bonus for number 3, if you had to turn off all marketing, stop posting, if you're someone who runs ads, you're not allowed to run ads, and your next customer had to come from a referral from a current relationship and the retention of your existing customers, what would your business look like, right? So for a lot of people, maybe not so good if our referral rate isn't very high. So this is a very challenging question, but it can be a super informative question for improving your business. So think of this as like, as I'm recording this, summer 2026, what would this look like January 2027, assuming I'm not, signing new clients or doing all this marketing? I have to keep my existing ones and rely on those existing customers, and then also build off of referrals. That's a super powerful way to think about it, because if we've engineered the customer experience appropriately, that should account for a significant part of new client acquisition. And we can actually start to project and forecast certain renewals, because the client relationships become a little more predictable, even if their transformations and their health cases are slightly different. It always kind of amazes me when certain people don't want to admit like, hey, I want to get better at retention. Everyone should want to get better at retention. It's not a super vulnerable thing. I was actually talking about this with a couple other health coaches and even my team, and chatting about it at home. And I was like, yeah, I think a lot of coaches don't even want to admit that they want to improve their retention, because it's almost like they're saying that it's not as good as it could be, but we should be striving to extend that. You can do it very ethically and in a way that's actually in the client's best interest. And part of that's going to be based on nutritional periodization. So when we think about retention, the way I used to think about this is probably 15 years ago at this point, or over a dozen years ago. It's like, well, if I sign a client and they like me and we really get along pretty well and we just jive together, we talk about certain topics that we're both interested in, hey, maybe that person's going to stay a long time. Like, certainly I'm going to try hard on their program and do all the things, but part of it has to do with like the personality fit and do they like me? Well, they've gone through their first 6-month program or 12-month program, now I need to give them some type of discount so they stay. When you may even be raising prices on new customers over time, or have new offers that have come out, there can be a place for loyalty incentives for sure. There's a difference between that and like a massive discount that's completely interrupting your overall business operations. So the new way, which is more systems-based retention, we're thinking about streamlining the process, understanding that skills produce results for clients, and we can continue to improve and cultivate our coaching skills over time. And that we want to have a strategy for client experience that leaves lasting brand impressions. And that starts with your marketing before you even acquire the client, and then it lasts throughout the entire customer journey. One of the things I see a lot of people mess up when they're trying to scale or reach more clients, have a larger roster, is they think that because they grow their audience, that all of a sudden now it's one to many. Like, we run a live program in FNMS. There's a number of coaches in there at any time. That doesn't mean it's necessarily like the acquisition piece and the onboarding and the retention. There's still a lot of one-to-one components of that. It doesn't mean it's one to many. You're still going to be, even as you grow your business and improve your business, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about in terms of retention happens one customer at a time or one client at a time. I think people forget that, and they kind of get in front of themselves in an attempt to grow, and they end up taking like a step forward and 2 steps back. And then they have to do more sales and marketing efforts to replace the leaky bucket of the client roster because of the people that left, or the client roster atrophied. And that puts a lot of pressure on you as someone, let's say you enjoy coaching and you don't really love marketing and sales. There's certainly a reason to get better at it and to build skills in those areas, but you're only making it harder on yourself if you don't have like bulletproof retention. It's going to create issues where you're going to constantly feel like, oh, well, I lost 2 clients, or 2 people just took a break. Well, now I got to go and acquire 3 to even be 1 ahead than where I was last month. And a lot of coaches find themselves in that situation. So here's some retention math to really solidify these concepts. So if we have $300 per month for an offer, right? Maybe you charge $500 or $1,000 or $200 or $100. This is just a hypothetical example based on some averages. Does not need to be your particular offer, right? This number could change. Think of it as it could be like a algebra equation where we have X times the number of months. So the math at $300 per month times 6 months is an $1,800 lifetime client value in terms of the gross revenue. $300 a month times 18 months actually puts us at about $5,400 there. When we actually like boosted that retention. And obviously any improvement, even getting them to 12 months, even if it's not 18 months, still makes a really big difference. But when you look at that difference in lifetime client value, having that one person stay twice as long or 3 times as long, that almost replaces like an entire new customer that you would have had to sign and go out of your way and spend time, energy, resources, or money if you're running advertising in order to acquire that person. For implementation and metrics. So what we want to be thinking about here in this implementation phase is one retention lever per quarter. It's going to be tempting to leave this and try to do everything that I talked about today. That would be like a client who just learned what protein was, trying to optimize every single aspect of their health. They get overwhelmed and then they quit. So think about one key retention lever over the next 90 days. July 1st was the beginning of Q3. What can we do by October 1st as far as a retention lever? You can use things like average month's retention per client, churn percentage, activation rate, check-in and completion rate could be used as an ongoing 30-day scorecard. So that's something that you'll track moving forward versus the tools I'm providing allow you to reflect on where you've been. So what has retention looked like up until the point of this? Then in the implementation phase, I'm going to pick a lever and I'm going to work on that significantly. So maybe it's activation points, or, hey, I don't do the best job of expectation management. I really need to nail down those 3 conversations in order to improve my retention. We're going to focus on that. For some of you, you need support with the periodization and you need to learn the science aspects of this. And by becoming a more skilled coach, the periodization, the health testing, symptom scorecards, now I can weave that into my coaching because I'm going to extend the client relationship through the value that I'm providing and the contribution to the client. The client health review is not like Sally lost 5 pounds and Jane lost 3. The health is more of the health assessment of your roster. So think of it less in terms of the internal health of the clients you're working with, and that it's more the health of your business and your retention. Retention doesn't just keep clients, it also turns them into your best marketing material. 2 reasons. Clients we retain that we have good relationships with are more likely to give us referrals. That's something I've experienced over the years. It's not that new clients won't ever give you referrals. Sometimes they do right out of the gate. That's amazing. I wouldn't say that that's as common as a client who's been with you with a long-standing relationship, who's like, hey, yep, Sam's my guy for this. Go see this person, talk to them. They're going to take care of you. So when we think about this, long-standing relationships lead to easier marketing, but also we have a greater chance of having social proof with the person. When we retain them longer and we're producing results along the way, we create what's necessary to have social proof in our marketing, to be able to take the client testimonial and post it online. Not just the before and after photo, but maybe it's a video, maybe it's a heartfelt story about their experience, things that they may know about your business and the character and the core values of your business because they've worked with you for a really long time can kind of make it come to life. So think of that retention as a flywheel that feeds forward into marketing. So when you deliver results, extend retention, increases LTV. That in itself is essential for a successful business. But there's this positive sort of overflow that happens or ripple effect that happens when you get this right. And that's trust builds over time. You get new clients in the flywheel. And then now if we have a great system and strategy for LTV, we're now boosting that across multiple clients, then earning those referrals and delivering results again. The next piece to consider is that even though we're talking about retention, most people think of this as a client signed an agreement or made a payment, and now retention starts with client fulfillment. I would argue that aspects of client retention and alignment actually start before the sale, before the client agreement, before the first payment is made, because your brand and what you post online or what you're known for in the community, the relationships you have, the way you communicate, your messaging all plays a role. Your promise. So a lot of coaches have like a promise in their Instagram bio. Some people will post things like drop 20 pounds in 20 days, or I do such and such, without cutting alcohol and pizza. You guys have all seen those sort of Instagram bios. Your promise also impacts the churn. So if you're making certain promises in your marketing and people have an expectation because of that marketing, that will impact retention on the back end. So you want to make sure that the marketing promises and the offers are actually aligned. You want to market to your best clients. So when you think about your Instagram, when you think about your site or your sales process or discovery process, enrollment process, whatever you want to call it, think about that sort of golden prospect or golden cohort and what their goals were, what their frustrations were, and speaking in plain language in terms of their problems, pain points, frustrations, and aspirations. Everyone else is kind of a bonus on top of this. You want to share the journey versus just selling a challenge. So many people talk about, and you guys probably get frustrated with this, the 5-day fixes and the cleanses and the detoxes and just do this and magically everything's going to be better in 30 days. Try to feature the types of stories that you're telling. So 6 to 18 month stories or 2-year stories, or the longevity of a relationship also paints an expectation of, hey, I could potentially be working with this person for a while. Even in the process of enrollment, being able to future pace, hey, yeah, this is our starting program, but it's actually quite common for people to stay on. Like if you have a percentage, hey, yeah, 92% of people actually opt to stay in this container because they value the support and they're working on this, this, and this, or they've addressed their baseline health concerns and now we're working on a performance goal. Train prospects to think in terms of that journey, not just the 2-week kind of flash before and after marketing. Because if you do a lot of that, you're not only painting an expectation, which we'll talk about how expectations play an important role in client retention, and most coaches get this wrong, but we have the expectation piece, and it's also really important for baking in conversations around periodization once the person starts to onboard. And we'll go into periodization a little bit. So brand and marketing start to influence retention before the person ever gets on their first call or submits that application. Then from that application forward, there are more things we can do for retention as well. Decommoditizing your positioning. So this is why I think in an era of AI and everything else that's going on right now, GLP-1s and all of the relevant topics in the health and fitness space, there has to be something more than just macros, right? That's setting coaches apart. 10 years ago, maybe that worked. It doesn't anymore. So a lack of, when you are not a commodity, if it's not like store-bought toilet paper versus brand name toilet paper, but there's actually something unique about it in terms of the difference, people actually have some sort of switching cost, or there's a mental association in terms of the uniqueness of the service you provide. Part of that is your personal brand and your values and your skill. Some of it is the mental categorization of your service. So we just want to be aware of that. This is a framework I built specifically for today. I've never talked about it before. It's just a helpful little acronym for remembering different components of retention. You can implement these kind of one at a time. Ideally, your business incorporates all 4 of them. Some are easier to do than others. Some will require a higher level of coaching skill, and you'll deploy it over time. So the P stands for periodization. So periodization is the idea. It's basically just a fancy word from the exercise science space that means planning. So I've talked about in my book, Metabolism Made Simple, the idea of having seasons of nutrition. People are not in the same phase of nutrition all the time. We're not just only going to be in a diet phase. Maybe we need a maintenance phase or a health phase. So periodization is a part of retention because it sets the prospect's eyes or the client's eyes on the next target or goal. So future pacing towards performance, or, hey, we worked on health and now it's going to be easier to achieve an aesthetic goal. Periodization is part of retention. Really, really hard to have super long retention if you're kind of like a one-trick pony that only does something for 12 weeks. You may have a great rinse and repeat system. It might be efficient for you from a time perspective, but it's very unlikely that you're going to have 18-month retention if you only have like one particular skill set. So for a long time, probably about 5 years ago, there were certain coaches who would just reverse diet people for like 12 to 16 weeks. That was all they knew how to do, or linear caloric progression regression. And very, very hard to keep a client for 2 years if that's all that we're doing. So periodization is part of this. I personally would like to initiate conversations around what we may be working on next when we're like 70, 80% of the way to target. Even if we've got 10 to 20% of work to do, we don't need to get ahead of ourselves in terms of changing the day-to-day habits, but it's also letting the client know some options as far as what we could potentially work on next or the direction of the program, and getting a feel for certain things they're excited about, passionate about, or things they want to pursue. And we've seen that with people going from having aesthetic goals to maybe all of a sudden they're like, hey, I want to run a 5K, or I want to try this new diet or do this thing. And I always viewed it as my responsibility as a coach. I'm going to entertain those interests and what they're excited about, what that passion is, and keep them safe around the pursuit of whatever it is they want to do. So periodization is big. A stands for activation points. These are key onboarding milestones that a lot of coaches kind of do habitually without being intentional about them. I know that sounds weird. It's like it's a habit, but it's not intentional. You do things in terms of your program design, your onboarding experience, your messaging, your communication, the cadence that you talk to these clients, but we don't always have defined actions that dictate the first 6 months of retention, even 7 days, right? Things can feel very haphazard, even in 7 to 14 days, first month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. So design onboarding to drive key actions within the first 14 days. Time to value and time to education and relationship building, very, very important with a service-based business. So when you have someone on board, there's like a ticking clock of what can I be doing in the first 5 to 7 days to get this program turned around, to get some quick wins, get something installed for them, or eliminate frustration. It doesn't always have to be like a crazy positive outcome. I'm not saying, hey, this person lost 10 pounds in the first week. That's not what I'm saying at all. It could be they didn't actually lose weight. Their weight stayed the same, but you eliminated frustration. You saved them time. You got rid of a headache, something that was going wrong before the coaching relationship. You clear that out, and that can be part of onboarding and activation. You want to track activated versus non-activated clients separately, ideally, or looking at it. So for example, we do a kickoff call inside of our program. We have a few other key activation points that we know will influence someone's success inside of the program. There's a few of them that happen over the span of 1 to 2 weeks. Kind of instantly have a red flag. If someone has not done those things, we know we have to reach out and be proactive about making that happen in order to improve retention. C stands for communication. I'd say coaches probably focus on this the most. It's like, what am I doing on my check-ins? What software am I using? What app am I using? How often do I talk to someone? Should I do calls? Should I do Loom videos? Should I do email check-ins? Coaches talk a lot about the C in PACE, but sometimes miss again. It's like they're doing things habitually, but it's not intentional from like a 10,000 foot view looking at the business from a big picture perspective. When I was doing a higher volume in terms of my personal roster of private clients, I like to do one very structured check-in per week. And then there would be additional like micro touch points outside of that. Now, not all of those should be automated, right? You see a lot of people automating every single aspect of this. Some things like scheduling reminders, call booking reminders, hey, submit this on time style reminders. That type of automation I think can be helpful for you and save you time in your business. Some little micro touch points, it's helpful to do yourself. So it could be a 10-second voice note, could be a quick little text message, or however you're communicating with these folks, very short video, and get that rolling. Ideally, we want to have some type of playbook to follow in communication if someone has not hit key activation points. So that becomes the main focus of communication if they haven't onboarded properly. And then E is expectations. This one I've included in intake forms for probably over 10 years now, realizing how important it is, really emphasized it the most over the last 8 years. And expectations are not just expectations that you have of the client. It's also, what does the client expect of themselves? And what does the client expect out of the coaching relationship? If those three things are not aligned and we haven't talked about them, it's a surefire way to create miscommunication, upset, frustration, and resentment. So what does the coach expect out of the client as part of this process? What does the client expect out of themselves? What does the client expect out of the coach? All three of those ideally are checked, and we have that. It can be helpful to have some type of written expectation alignment at onboarding, or in your coaching agreement, having some like an expectations section related to behavior. Or maybe it's, if there's a couple first steps the person goes through in your process, that those expectations are communicated. Is you are filling a roster for your coaching business that resonates with you. So some of you are looking, maybe you want 50 clients. Someone else may want 10 clients. Really depends on where you are in your journey. But we're looking to improve that roster, the health of that roster through the retention, the results we produced from those clients, the referrals that we get as a byproduct of those results. And then ideally, that's what's boosting revenue, because you see so many people online talk about, well, add revenue as a health coach and do this business program and do that. But they don't ever really talk about the client results, retention, or referrals, which is how I know like my BS kind of red flag meter goes off, because you need those things for a sustainable coaching business long-term. So client results, first, systematic problem solving, producing predictable results because of our expertise. Retention, clients stay longer, make better progress. And we're also deploying some of the systems and strategies that we talked about today to streamline that relationship, one client at a time. Then we have our referral mechanism, which helps us get off the sales hamster wheel. And instead, we operate on a flywheel, which helps us over time, both in terms of the sustainability and scalability of that business. Revenue is a byproduct of the retention, results, and referrals, and keeps things moving along over time.